In this section, I'll be explaining elastic IP address. Now, elastic IP address, especially how you can connect it to your AWS EC2 instance. Now, what are the benefits of having elastic IP address? Now, for elastic IP address, it's very essential for you to know the use case because it is much easy and it is straightforward. Now, an elastic IP address is a static public IPv4 address. It was designed by cloud providers like AWS for dynamic cloud computing. Unlike a standard public IP that changes whenever a server stops or get restarted. Now, one thing you need to understand is an elastic IP address is tied to your account. It's allowing you to retain the same fixed address. Now, key thing that you need to understand about the elastic IP address and its benefit. Now, assuming you have a server, right? Now, in this server, you turn on your server is running, your server is broadcasting a particular IP address. Now, let's call it this IP. Let's call this 10. As an example, right? Now, this IP address, even though this is not a real IP address, as of now, that I set up, this is broadcasting this IP address. Guess what? Once you stop your server, right, this IP address, public IP address, is gone. Somebody on the open internet won't be able to have access to it. Okay? Now, by someone, I mean you have a user and you send the IP address to this person. Once the server stops, the person will no longer have access to that server. Now, how can this be fixed? To fix this, that is where elastic IP address comes in, where elastic IP address is a service that is also offered by AWS. Now here is going to be elastic IP. Now for this elastic IP address, the user will be pointed to that. Now your elastic IP address is going to be up and running 24/7, and guess what? It will be attached to your instance. In this case, but before that, one thing you should understand that I also forgot to mention is without the elastic IP address, if your user is trying to access your server and your server goes offline, if it goes offline and it comes back online, guess what happens? This IP address changes. It could change to something like this. Right? Now remember, the user actually have access to the previous number, but the user is not aware of this change. To bridge that gap, to solve that problem of dynamically changing the IP address based on server restart, and then also to ensure high availability, a fixed endpoint for the client, they are required. Now, one thing you should also understand that is that in order to achieve this, you need to create an elastic IP address, attach it to your AWS EC2 instance. Elastic IP address are generally free of charge as long as they are attached to a running resources like EC2 instance or a NAT gateway. However, one thing you should understand is you will incur a small hourly fee if the elastic IP address is allocated but left unassociated or attached to a stopped instances. Now, in this video, I'll be walking you through a step-by-step instruction on allocating, attaching, and configuring an elastic IP address on AWS. You can also check out the documentation as well. Now, in your AWS environment, you log into your AWS environment. The next thing you need to do is click on EC2. And you go to your elastic IP under network and security. Here, you can actually see the actions. You can also click on allocate elastic IP address, which you click on it, and then you can specify the public IP address pool and the network border group. You can specify here. We want network border group here. Let's select this. It's already selected. And you can also specify the tag. Yeah, let's call it. Let's give it a value. My awesome server IP. Then you click on allocate. Now, this is the basic setup of an elastic IP address. However, one thing you should also understand is there is also another setup called the global static IP address. But for the sake of this video, we are focusing on just creating an elastic IP address that we need to attach to our EC2 instance. Now, these are just being created, and this is the visual representation of it. Let's copy the IP address, which is this. Now, this has been created in Silo. Let's also get our EC2 instance. Our EC2 instance that was created is right here. And this is the public IP address. And this is the address that is being published to the customer here. As you can see, in this case, we call them client, to your client. This is what the client is aware of. Okay. Now, you just create an elastic IP address. It is floating. It has never been attached to an EC2. Now, to check what I just said, if you stop and you restart this EC2, is this IP address going to change? Let's check that out. Now we're going to stop this instance. You click on the instance of your choice. Then you click on the instance state. You click on stop. Do not terminate. If you terminate your instance, the whole server will be gone. We're also not trying to reboot. All we're trying to do is basic stop and start. You click on that. It's going to ask you for associated resources. Result can stop. But stop protection is currently disabled. You can also decide if you want to skip the OS shutdown, because this option skips the grateful OS shutdown process. You should only use when your instance must be stopped immediately, such as during an emergency or a failover. But in this case, let's just proceed. Click on stop. Once you click on stop, the instance will be going into a stopping state. You can see it says no matching instance found. The reason you are seeing this is because the instance that we filter is running. Now let's cancel that so that we'll see all the instances that are running. Now here you can see it shows stopping. And it's going to transition between stopping to stopped. And as you can see, it just transitioned to stopped. Let me refresh to make sure I'm getting the latest information. Now the instance has been stopped. Now let's start up the instance again. All we're trying to validate here is the IP address. Oh, also, why this is coming up, as you can see, is pending. Let's also check what happened down here. You can see the public IP address is empty, but guess what? You have a private IP address. Now, you see this public IP address, what happens to it? It comes back up. Now that it comes back up, it varies significantly from the IP address that we had before. Let's verify that. See, this is what we had before. Now it transitioned into this. Now, this is the transition. Now, if you also stop the instance again and you start it up, it's going to transition into a whole different server again. So in this case, that's represented by XX, XXX, XXX, XX. So it's going to keep transitioning from one state, from one IP address to another IP address. So in order to fix this, and your user will also, you need to let them know about the new IP address. In order to fix this, we need to use our elastic IP address that was provisioned. Now, the next thing you want to do is the ideal scenario should be something like this structure, where you connect, you broadcast this to your client. Let's call this client. And then you attach this to your instance. So regardless of the state of your instance, if it's in a start state or in a stop state, the elastic IP address is going to be fixed. Refresh. Now, to attach an elastic IP address, you go to elastic IP address, elastic IPs, and then you select your elastic IP address by selecting the checkbox next to the newly created elastic IP address from the list. The next thing is you click on the actions, and then you see the drop down. Here, what you need is associate elastic IP address. You do not want to release elastic IP address. We are not updating the reverse DNS, neither are we doing enable transfer, nor the disable transfer or the accept transfer. Here, you want to do associate elastic IP address. If you click on that, for resource type, you choose instance here, as you can see. Now the instance is what you select. Then you click on the private IP address. But before that, you select the instance here. Now this is the instance that is currently running. As you can see here, my awesome server. The private IP address, this is the private IP address of the instance. Now, the private IP address with which the instances are associated with. Remember, whenever you start or stop your instance, what stays? The private IP address always stays. It doesn't change. And because that's the internal IP. Then the next thing you want to do is click on associate. Reassociation. This is when you want to specify whether the elastic IP address can be reassociated with a different resources if it's already associated with the resources. Here, we don't want to do that. Click on associate. Now, once it has been associated, the next thing to do is you need to verify the connection. And then you have to make sure your server is accepting traffic on the new server. Then this is the new IP address. Let's have a mental note of that. Then you go to your instances. This was the previous IP address that you had. Let's refresh. You see now it changed. It changed to what? It changed to the new elastic IP address. Now this is structure you have. This is structure you have. Is the IP address, elastic IP address. Now it is now been associated with your EC2. Now let's delete this flow here. My awesome server. This is how you attach an elastic IP address to an EC2 instance. One final note I want to explain here is, think of elastic IP address as your permanent phone number, but not for you. In this case, it's going to be for your server. So imagine your server is a mobile phone. The problem is, every time you turn a standard cloud server off and back on, which I already said, AWS gives it a completely new phone number, which is an IP address. If you run a business, you can't keep texting your customer that, hey guys, please use this new phone number every morning. Now, the Elastic IP solution, and Elastic IP is a permanent phone number that you own. How does it help? If your physical phone, let's say, in this case, is your server, it breaks, you don't lose your number. You just buy a new phone. In this case, you build a new server, link your new server to your permanent phone number. So in this case, it's going to be you link your permanent number to it, and your customer can call you instantly without ever knowing your phone broke or it was stolen or it's let's say messed up or corrupted. So that is additional benefit of using an elastic IP address. Now here in this section, I want to explain to you EBS, which is Elastic Block Store Volume. Now, what is EBS? EBS is basically the Elastic Store Volume. Is a durable block level storage device that you attach to your running server. Your server here is EC2 instance. Essentially, is acting as a virtual hard drive for your cloud server. Now, let me break it down. What does that mean? Imagine your server is a laptop, and an EBS volume is a USB external hard drive. The problem here is the temporary storage built directly into your cloud server. It wipes itself completely clean the moment you turn off the server. Once that server is gone, your EBS volume is gone. All the data, everything gone, wiped clean. And there is no way for you to bring it back. Now, an EBS volume solves this. How does it solve it? An EBS volume is an external hard drive that plugs into your cloud server using a virtual cable. Now, how does it help in this situation? It saves your data safely. If your laptop server crashes or you want to upgrade to a faster model, you simply unplug the virtual hard drive from the old server and plug it into the new one. All your file, photos, databases are exactly where you left them. Now, let's go ahead and set up our EBS volume. Now, while you're going ahead to set up your EBS volume, it's very essential for you to understand some key feature. Key features such as persistent storage, data that remains instant, even when the instance is stopped or is terminated. Now, just to expatiate on that, the data will remain instant even when the instance gets stopped. Also, independent lifecycle. The volume exists independently out of the EC2 instance. Now, here, this is a visual representation of that. You have an EC2 instance. And then you have your storage here. Your storage can be attached to your EC2 instance. So the lifecycle of your volume exists independently from the EC2 instance and can be detached and moved. If you have this, and this is EBS volume, you can attach it. You can also detach it. Now, if you have, let's say, two EC2 instances, you can attach the EBS volume to this server. You can detach it and move it elsewhere. If this server goes down, or let's say you get corrupted, guess what? You could also create a new server. You can detach it and then move it elsewhere or move it back here. And also, another thing that you should also understand is snapshot for backups. You can take point in time. You can take point in time backup that's saved directly to Amazon S3, which means that Amazon has something called S3, and that is a storage where you store all your files, or file storage. Now, here you can take a snapshot of this EBS volume, which is the current state of this EBS volume. You can take a copy of it and save it somewhere in S3 bucket. You can save multiple of it. Also, encryption. Encryption is also built-in offer that is built seamlessly. Data encryption with no performance impact. Now, with the aid of with the current age of compliance, where data needs to be encrypted at rest, EBS volume also offers that, where your data is encrypted at rest and it is locked. Now let's dive into creating your EBS. While creating your EBS, you're going to see there are different common type of EBS. You go to your console home. If you cannot find it, you can search it. But here, let's go to our EC2. That's my favorite place to go. And EBS volume right here under Elastic Block Store. You click on volume. And you can see this is the default volume that was created by default with the server. Now you want to create your own volume. You click on create volume on the top right. Then you select the volume type. Now, there are different types of volume. There's GP3 and GP2, which is best used for standard workload, boot volumes, and development environment. There's IO2, IO1, which is provisioned IOP SSD, and that is designed largely for speed for databases, and especially intensive apps, IO intensive apps. There's ST1, SA1, which is for low-cost option optimized for large streaming workload or cold data storage. Here, we will just want to choose general purpose. And the size, and this is basically the size of the EBS volume of your choice, and this is the IOP. Also the throughput. You can also specify the throughput and the availability zone. The snapshot, you can also create specify the snapshot. And this simply means if you already have a snapshot already and you want you can create a snapshot, or you can use an existing snapshot. You can also encrypt this volume. In this case, we want to encrypt the volume. You can specify your own KMS key, or you can specify you can use AWS default key. Let's use AWS default key, default master key that protects my EBS volume when no other key is defined. And you can see the owner is this account, KMS ID. And here there's a warning that says volumes that are created from encrypted snapshot are automatically encrypted using the same key as the snapshot. or using a different key that is specified. Volumes that are created from unencrypted snapshots are automatically unencrypted, but you can choose to encrypt them using a specific key if no snapshot is selected. You can choose to encrypt the volume and specify your own key. Okay, good. We're not using any snapshot. It's always advisable to tag your resources in AWS. So here we're going to call it my awesome server EBS. Then you click on create volume. Now here, remember that we have 50 gigabytes of default EBS volume that was attached to our EC2, and here is the one that we just created. Now you can see the status is what is in creating mode state, and this is in use state. And that is how you create your EBS volume. Now, once you've done creating your EBS volume, the next thing is going to be attach it to an EC2 instance. And that is this flow here, where the EBS volume has been created. Remember, we attach a KMS key to our EBS volume. Now, the next thing is let's attach it to our EC2. Boom. That's the plan. To do that, all you have to do is you have to select the checkbox next to the volume that we just created. Oh, before we proceed, you can see the volume state. This one is in use while this is available. Now, it's very essential for you to know the difference between the two. In use simply means the volume is in use, it is attached to an EC2 instance. Available simply means the volume is not attached to an EC2 instance. Now, you select the checkbox next to the volume that we just create. You click on action at the top right, then you select attach volume. Then you select the instance. Now, there's something here that you need to also understand. Here, if you refresh, you can see that the instance is not showing. No machine running instance stop in this region. Now, it's very essential for you to understand that the region where your instance was in and where you're trying to attach EBS volume to. In this case here, it appears we created our EBS volume in a completely different AZ. AZ means availability zone. We can neither select the instance nor select device ID. Now, these are common mistakes that people make when they create EBS volume. To fix this, you might think you can click on this and create it and move it to a different region. No, you have to create an EBS volume all over again. But before that, check your EC2 instance, check the region that your EC2 instance currently reside. AZ is EU West 2, AZ1. And you can also confirm. You can see EU West 2, AZ1. And the new one is in EU West 2, AZ2. That is EU West 2A. Or the previous one is in EU West 2C. So let's delete this. Now we're going to create another EBS volume in EU West 2C. That is AZ1. Click on create. In this case, we're going to specify, let's say 80 or 30. EU West 2C. And remember, always name your resources. My awesome server EBS. Then click on create. Now it is much easier for you to create. You know what you need to click, and you know what you need to select. Now let's double check this. If you click on that, EU West 2C, EU West 2C. Now once this EBS volume becomes available, we're going to attach it to an EBS, to an EC2 instance. Now you select the checkbox next to the EBS volume you want to attach. You click on action and then you select attach volume. Then the instance, you can see the instance showing up here. And device name, you specify the device name that you want to use. Now, we want to use the default, which is DEV SDF. Let's use this, dev SDF. Okay. Now, there's an information from here that says newer link kernel may rename your device to dev/dev/svdf through dev xvdp internally. Now let's proceed. Let's click on attach. Now it has been attached. Our initial EC2 instance resources and the new EBS volume are sharing the same instance. Okay, let's refresh. Not encrypted. Now this is essential. If you notice, the second EBS volume I created wasn't encrypted. That's why you're seeing this. The previous one, it was encrypted. That was intentional. And the reason for that is that we want the root EBS volume to be identical to the one we just created. Ideally, it's extremely encouraged to always encrypt your EBS volume because data address should be encrypted. That is the best practice. Now, the next thing we want to do is we just achieve this, but without the key, which is not good. But for the sake of this walkthrough, that mistake was intentionally done so that you see how easy it is for you to miss key details when building up your infrastructure. Okay, now the next thing is we need to format and mount the volume that we just created. Now let's proceed to this EBS volume has been attached, right? But then you now need to mount the volume to the EC2 instance. To do that, you have to log into your EC2 instance since it has been attached, and then you mount it. Let's proceed. Let's get our EC2 instance information. Click on connect. You want to log in. Yes, and then you log in into your server. Now here you type sudo bash and you want to lsblk. Okay, and this is the EC2 EBS volume that we just, let's double check that. Let's make sure we're using the right as you can see, 30 gigabytes. Now, what you want to do is you run lsblk to verify the attached storage name. And remember, we already told that it might appear differently, right? lsblk. Let's clear this. Okay, and then the next thing we want to do is we want to create a file system. To create a file system, mkfs, we already a root user, -t xfs, and then we want to specify the in this case, let's specify this file system. Okay, and the next thing you want to do is now let's create a directory. Let's create a directory, mkdir. Let's create a directory called data, and let's mount it. We want to mount Let's mount it to data. LSB OK, and there you go. There you have it. Now you have it being mounted to the data. Now this is how you can successfully mount an EBS volume to an EC2 instance, mounting it, attaching it, and also mounting it. Two separate things. You can attach an EBS volume to an EC2 instance without attaching it. Whenever you attach an EBS volume to an EC2 instance, always remember to also mount it as well by logging into your EC2 instance to complete the process. Now that is a walkthrough on how to create an EBS volume, on how to attach an EBS volume, and also how to mount an EBS volume.